Bert will be speaking from Presentation Mastery, and this is a level 1 speech timer. He will need 5 to 7 minutes. And his speech title is, What is Clinical Research? Today's speech is a research speech about clinical research. He will demystify what is involved in getting a drug from the trial phase to the in your arm and feel confident it will work. Again, timekeeper, he will need 5 to 7 minutes. Participants, note. If you have not yet updated your Zoom account to something higher than 5.2, you'll miss the biggest part of Bert's presentation. However, please join me to welcome Bert Copeland.
Have any of you even wondered a little bit in the last few months what they're talking about when they're talking about all these vaccines? Or do you care? I'm going to show you, first I'm going to show you the ideal way the clinical trial works. For all you ladies out there, from the time that they have an idea that they want to do something until the time that they can get it in your arm, pre-COVID could take 2 to 6 years. So I'm going to talk to pre-COVID right now. And I want to talk about clinical trials because clinical trials help us improve healthcare in more ways than you can imagine, not just for the drugs, but for the testing of the drugs and the new clinical procedures and the help that it brings that way. All the drugs and tools we have today, we have because somebody volunteered to do clinical trials. Maybe by the end of this, I'll convince you that you might want to do a clinical trial. What is a clinical trial? Well, first thing is they have a bunch of people that they want to try out. For example, this particular slide is for pancreatic cancer. So they have certain medical conditions. They have certain genders. They have other specific things that they want to test. If it's a specific drug that they want to test for a specific condition. There's about 4 things happening on this slide, but basically what it's talking about in the top left-hand corner, a double-blind study means that the person getting the drug and the person giving the drug have no idea who's getting what. So there's no prejudice on that end of it. The second thing is for normal clinical trials, they have randomized computer-generated designators. So the human element is taken out of it. It's double-blind, it's a random selection, and then at the bottom, one person gets the standard dosage plus the new drug, and the other person gets the standard dosing plus a placebo. Now keep in mind, this slide is designed as an adjuvant to a drug that's already there, and they're trying to see if it's doing better. But if it was just a brand new drug, it would be the new drug and the placebo. Clinical trials have 4 phases, but there's a 0 phase also, and that's the animal phase. That's where they test it on animals. If at any time a trial hits a roadblock in any of these phases, it stops there. It doesn't leapfrog to the next phase. Phase 1 helps with the safety and the dosage. It's a limited study. Phase 1 may only have maybe 100 people in it. And its main item is to see that it is safe and the dosage amount to give. About 70% of the drugs go from 0 phase to phase 1. In phase 2, it measures the actual efficacy of the drug and the side effects of the drug. This could have up to several thousand people. Keep that in your mind, up to several thousand people. And it investigates carefully the side effects of this drug. This phase 2, can take several months to up to 2 years. By this point, only 33% of the drugs that started out have come this far in the pipeline. Phase 3, you have randomized groups. You have one group that gets the drug and one group that gets the placebo. Generally speaking, in a normal study, it's 300 to 3,000, keep that number in mind, volunteers. And this length of the study is 1 to 4 years. And here they're monitoring safety, the efficacy of the drug, and adverse reaction. And by this point, about only 25% of the drugs have made it that far. And then in phase 4, it's approved. In the process of approving, it goes through a peer review board that looks at all the studies and makes sure they make sense. Does it make sense? Is this, or just some cooked numbers? And then it's approved. As I said, this could take up to 6 years. That's where I came into clinical research associates 3 years ago. They were doing a study on RSV, and I signed up for their study. Now in pre-COVID, the studies are, as I said, I came in at stage 3, and the study for that one was 18 months. Keep in mind that they only had about 3,000 volunteers. And then it went on to stage 4, where it still continued to be monitored for long term. The next study I did was for Anthrax vaccine for older adults. And that one took 18 months for that phase 3. And again, there were a limited number of people on that study. And the last one I did was for a pneumonia vaccine. Now, at all stages of this vaccine study, they would take the first 2 weeks, you would monitor your temperature, and you have a diary that you had to fill out daily, and any adverse reactions. Were noted, and they were called immediately. And I also carried a card so that if I ever had to go to the doctor or the hospital, I had to notify them. Now we're going to jump into COVID real quickly here, because they've replaced numbers with time. So instead of having 3,000 volunteers that we used to scramble for, the first AstraZeneca vaccine has 28,000 volunteers. The second one has 30,000 from the other company. Johnson & Johnson has one currently with 60,000 volunteers. In June of last year, 3 months after COVID was detected, they cracked the DNA code, and they had 83 potential drugs in the pipeline. And right at the moment, there's 30. So you have to ask yourself, how do you feel about this? And I'm going to tell you from my viewpoint that I think the numbers speak for themselves, because in a traditional study, remember I said we had to fight to get 3,000. Some of these studies are having 60,000 people, and I can feel real comfortable about that. These are some sources that you may want to check into. And I would hope that if you had an opportunity, that you would volunteer to help in one of these studies. If you don't want to do clinical research, Vanderbilt has studies also. And I would ask you to really think about these studies and the efficacy of the drugs they're putting out now, and consider taking the vaccines. Madam Toastmaster.